Sorry, there's music playing in here that
I can hear it from your
Hello and welcome to Koller Commentary. This is Eunjee and I'm here with your favorite co-host of mine, Won Hee Lee.
Hello.
Oh, this is not funny because our guests are not listening to the sound effects that are happening right now. But we are excited because it has been a while since we have had guests on the podcast. And not only do we have regular guests, but we have a near celebrity in our midst.
Oh gosh.
Oh, that's not it. Yay. I'll cut that. Okay, so as you guys know, we are doing an Enneagram series and we wanted to start exploring different dynamics that we wanted to understand within the Enneagram. And so we have invited Andrew Cha and Sarah Cha onto the pod. Welcome, guys.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. You're welcome.
Yay, welcome to the show.
So, Wani, do you want to introduce them?
Yeah, sure. So Andrew and Sarah are our friends from our church, and they're both famous for different reasons. Andrew is an Enneagram master, self-proclaimed Enneagram master. This
Not
is all the
self-proclaimed.
books. No. Oh, okay. Not self-proclaimed. Sorry.
Many proclaimed him.
You're right.
Including,
Others proclaimed.
Yeah.
But
Nominated
including the
as.
Tian. Shout out. Tian.
Universally proclaimed master at the Enneagram. Listens to all the books, listens to all the podcasts. He's an engineer. Originally hails from
Berkeley,
California.
California.
All right.
Ooh, Cal fans in the house.
And next to Andrew, we have Sarah, aka
Sriracha.
aka Simply Yenny, Instagram famous jewelry creator, and they are the powerful dynamic duo, shepherds of
Kenya House Church, what up?
yeah, and we invited them just to come and share about their lives, about their marriage, about all the ways that the Enneagram has kind of informed the ways that they see the world, things like that. So we're super excited to have you guys on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What made you guys say yes to us? Only because it's like very random since I had not yet met them formally at the church, but I had heard that from someone that had also proclaimed Andrew as a Enneagram master, that he was a Enneagram type that matched my husband's. I was like, oh my gosh, to know someone that knows themselves with the type that my husband has, but doesn't know himself would be amazing for me, you know? And so I was really excited about it. And then just hearing more of how you guys thrive individually, but also together, I was like, they definitely have to be our guests. But it was probably a little weird for someone new to just say, hey, can you guys, you know, come on the pod?
Well, so for me, like, it was definitely heard that I was in like high demand to be talked to about the Enneagram. I think it was Iris. But I was expecting more of just like conversation, like, I'd love to talk to anyone about the Enneagram. So the podcast portion, I didn't like quite say yes to at first. Not that I said no, but when I found out about it, it was through Sarah. And Sarah is the one that said yes. And I was like, oh, I guess we're doing this. And that'll
number
come
one,
in
boys.
When you get our Enneagram numbers, then that makes more sense.
I said yes because I was very confident that Andrew would be able to speak on the topic as well as he does.
But you're also an expert, you know?
I'm not an expert. He's my consultant. Anything I post about Enneagram or anything I say about Enneagram is all filtered through my husband.
I think that's really cool that you had mentioned was Simply Yenny, your earring business. What spoke out to me actually when I thought it'd be weird to follow someone I had not yet met, but I was like, oh my gosh, this person does an Enneagram series on her earrings so that each of her handcrafted jewelry that she really puts a lot of intention to also has sort of a characteristic or a personality based on the Enneagram as well. And so I thought that was really something that spoke out to me, which is why I felt like you too were an expert. But to know you guys had that kind of partnership is also really cool to think about. So I guess before we jump into you guys together, I would love to know how each of you guys got into the Enneagram separately, and what did that journey look like in understanding yourself with your Enneagram type?
So actually, we were introduced to it together. So it wasn't like separate at first. So like we actually had like a meal with one of our mentor couples, and they introduced the Enneagram to us as like one of the conversation topics. They pretty much brought up this book, and they're like, oh yeah, like personalities and getting to know yourself and things like that. I guess it was a weird thing that I bought the book and I read it. And like when I met them later, I remember she said like, wait, you actually bought it? Like, cause like, no, I guess it's not that common where like you'll like recommend things, but like if they follow through and buy it and read through it, then it's like more rare. But that was about the extent of it. And it wasn't until like a year later or more, maybe 1 to 2 years, where our church did an Enneagram series for early morning prayer. And so that's when it got a little more popular. And that's when I had like my second dive into it and got a lot more deeper into it. And I think that's around the time Sarah also started getting into it more. So
I think I started getting into it a little before that because you would push it on me a lot. Yeah, because I remember by then, like I knew my number already. And finding out my number was a journey in itself, and a lot of self-reflecting and denial went into that entire process too.
We like forgot a lot about that process, but Sarah like thought she knew her number multiple times before she actually landed on her number. So
I think it took like 6 months.
yeah, it was a long journey for Sarah.
Yeah.
For me, I like knew almost instantly.
I feel like I didn't take any initiative to learn about the Enneagram at all. It was all just through Andrew, like sharing like, oh, read this, read that. Like you have to read this. This is you, or like you might be this. And so I remember around the time, it was when Enneagram was just becoming more of a hot topic within our church community. And so I didn't read the book. I would follow some people on Instagram here and there, but even then, like Enneagram podcasts and YouTubers were not as popular. But that's around the time when our church did that early morning prayer is when things started getting like, it was like popping at the time. And so I just started seeing it more. And then with Andrew being in my ear all the time about it too, like, yeah, that's how I got into it.
So what did you first think you were?
I think I thought I was a 6.
Okay.
Right?
That was a big one.
Yeah. I thought I was a counter type 6.
Ooh, are you guys going to teach us about all the different types?
Oh, you can.
we can touch on it.
Touch upon it. Don't want to confuse everyone out there because that's like a whole other world. But
yeah, I think I recently learned, I know Enneagram's like 9 numbers, but if you delve into it a little more with subtypes, it's technically like 27 different kinds of personalities. So yes, I don't even know what subtype the counter type 6 is, but that's what I thought I was.
Okay. And then you were open to that one? And then you later, so you
no. I was in a lot of denial about being a 6 because I heard that 6s were the most common number, and I was like, I don't want to be the most common number. That's boring. But yeah, I think I read upon 6 a lot, like the counter type 6. And then I think the more I read about it, I think I started to like change my thoughts about like trying to form into that number instead of like letting myself define myself through it. And so as we were reading more, and then he was like, maybe you should read upon the different types of within the triad or something. And that's when I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
And then you got to your type?
Yeah. I don't know if we're supposed to reveal it now. Okay, yeah. I'm a 3-wing 4.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Had no idea.
So how did you get there? And then like, what was your reaction or journey to accepting that?
I think I was in even more denial when I came upon 3 more than I was the 6, because I think the people pleasing aspect or like doing things to like look good to people was very hard for me to swallow. But then I guess as Andrew and I would just be in times of reflection with each other, and like I would have moments with God, like I realized like that's how I've been entirely living my life up until I guess like recently, even though like I think parts of me still, of course, like that threeness I don't think will ever go away. But yeah, I was like, I don't care what people think. Like I live whatever, like I do whatever I want to do, not to like please people. But then like reflecting back on like my high school years and my college years, I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I lived. Every single thing I did, I think the motive was, what would other people think of me if I do this?
I think part of the confusion was like, so she landed on 6 for a while, and she touched on like 7 and 8 and 3, like going back and forth. One of the characteristics of the 3 is like they are very good at like becoming other types of personalities when they need to be. Like if they sense like, oh, something is like desirable, or like this is what it should be like, then like they'll convince themselves. Like their 3s, I think, are like one of the best at convincing themselves of something, even if it's not like the true nature. It's just like a temporary state. So I think anyone could tell Sarah was more outgoing of a personality type, which like led to like the more assertive types. But like as we narrowed it down, I think 3 really spoke out, because one thing that people say a lot is that like when you read about your own type, it kind of offends you the most, and you kind of like deny it because you'll think that's not me, but you have more of a like visceral reaction to it because it like touches on something that like deep down you don't like, maybe because you do see it in yourself. So
yeah, for sure. And I see how like parts of my childhood like grew me into like the person that I am now. And I'm like, okay, I can see why I would like feel the need to have to constantly be achieving something. So like even during COVID, when I started Simply Yenny, Andrew was like, what kind of person would start a business like in the middle of the world like catching on fire? And like I was just going through a lot with my family too, but like that was my coping mechanism to like I have to keep myself busy and like be doing something. And so even in that, I saw a lot of like threeness come out.
So what are the, I guess, like strengths you've realized with being a 3? I know at first it was this initial no, because, you know, you don't want to identify with some things that are really deeply rooted within you. But I feel like 3s are also some of the most like effective, successful people in like so many ways. And I'm just curious, like when did that part start being what you really owned into and like felt like, yeah, you know?
I don't know if I'm fully there yet, actually. I think I'm still in the process of it. Oh man, that's a really hard question.
If I can jump in, I think Sarah just
can't toot her own
she
horn.
can't exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
She has a very like a mental block when she has to like talk herself up. So, but like she just said like when she was stressed and like going through a lot of stuff, her coping mechanism was literally to start a business. Like who does that, right? Like I'm just gonna make a new income and like put all this energy and create things that are like beautiful and like part of like my vision and all these things. And like she just naturally has like the urge to like do things and be productive and be effective, and it like seeps into everything. And so that's one obvious thing.
Because even in that, there's people who will start things, right, and just do, but then someone stopped you on the streets this week, right? Like, because your following on Instagram is pretty huge, and I think that's a testament to what people are attracted to in your character and the ways that you're using such a platform for like, I know you like raise money or like partner to like raise money for other organizations you believe in. And I think that's something that's really special. And I think, you know, that's really helpful to understand like the heart of a 3 versus what we see from a 3, because I bet a lot of people, oh my gosh, it's like amazing. And while it still is, like, it's okay for you to not fully feel there in certain ways. And so that's really cool to hear that difference. And also like, how it's still such an effective and powerful gift. So
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. I love that Andrew jumped in and kind of
he does that a lot.
Tag team for you.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Do you remember a memory when you were a child? I know you had shared like you can see how that formed. Do you have a specific memory where like, oh, that's clearly like, yep, I'm a 3 being 4 maybe, but 3.
There's part of the Enneagram book where it's like 3s were probably the ones who like finished their test and slammed their pencil on the desk. I was like, I'm done. That was me. That was totally me.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to think of the kid who did that back in elementary.
But yeah, that was me. And I like always like tried to strive for like being the top student of the class and like get the certificates and stuff like that. And I think it came from, so my brother was really smart, like really smart. And my parents would kind of compare me to him a lot. And so I think I was trying to like measure up to the pedestal I saw him on. And so I think that's kind of where it came from.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I did.
Great. The communication here is a check. Andrew, what about you? We're going to shift over to you. What was your journey like? You can reveal your number whenever you want.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm pretty like vague on my memories, like how I started. But like I mentioned earlier, I read the book and then like I kind of got into it, but I didn't get super into it for a while. But then the second time it came around, I got more into it. And that's when I started listening to like all the podcasts and everything. And I suspected already after the first time, like, oh, I'm pretty sure I'm a 9. And so I am a 9. Spoiler. Sorry.
My God.
But like ever since the beginning, it's like you can read it and then, yeah, like a 9 is kind of distinct where it's like you'll read it and you'll be like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, because one of the characteristics of a 9 is they kind of see a lot of other people's perspectives, and so they see themselves in a lot of other types of personalities as well. And so like every number I read, I'd be like, oh, I can relate with that. I can relate with that. I can relate with that. And I related with every number, which like would make you think it's harder to figure out what you were. But one of the traits of the 9 is like you will relate to every number. I think how the book described it was like the 9s are at the top of the Enneagram circle, and that's because they can like see how everyone else kind of sees the world. So yeah, I was like pretty confident I was a 9, but even to this day, like every once in a while, I'm like, maybe I'm this number, maybe I'm that number, because I relate so much to like another type of number. But it's just phases that I like go in and out from. So
Do you do that too, Wani?
I relate to that a lot, because I think one of the feelings I remember having is like, yeah, so I was reading the book and I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Oh, I kind of know that feeling too. And then I was like, but I feel like I can relate to all these, but I don't necessarily like belong to any of these, you know? And then I think when I got to the 9, I was like, oh, it makes sense that I feel like I don't necessarily, I can understand, but not necessarily belong in the other numbers. But the 9 was where I felt like, okay, this is like where I belong, because that's like a core feeling of a 9. Yeah.
So then when you realized you were a 9, how was that feeling or acceptance of?
It was not very eventful, actually. It was just kind of like, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I feel that too.
It's kind of, yeah, it's just like, yeah. One, I guess, funny thing related is when we did have the church series on it, people were obviously interested in like what other numbers were and like guessing and things like that too. And many people were surprised that I was a 9. They're like, no way you're a 9. Like, there's no way you're a 9. Like, you're not nice enough to be a 9.
I was about to ask why, but
because actually I have this will come back later, but I have a strong 8 wing. So I'm a 9 wing 8. And so every once in a while, like through my behaviors, it might seem like I have 8 tendencies, whereas a 9 might be quieter or more reserved. But like an 8, like in terms of stereotypes, an 8 will be more like out there and like willing to like say things or do things that 9s might never ever be seen doing. So a lot of people actually thought I was an 8, but I just tell them, no, I'm like a 9 with a strong 8 wing.
How strong?
Oh, it's
Yeah.
very strong.
It's a very
Very
strong 8 wing. Yeah. So
How does that work for you when you're like a walking controversy?
yeah, not very well. So 9 wing 8 and actually 3 wing 4, which Sarah is,
It's
are
also kind of
Yeah,
They're,
very, yeah.
those are like the two controversial, like
Contradicting.
contradicting types. Like it's a lot of internal conflict because the two are kind of polar opposites in a lot of ways, and so yeah, it's just a lot of turmoil and just stress, I guess. You just live with stress all the time.
I see. When was I guess, one of your early childhood memories of you being like, oh yeah, I saw that then?
Oh, I don't know. They're very like bad memory. Not bad in that sense, but like it's the sense that I was always like very, very nice and kind of like a pushover in a sense, but I was also very, very stubborn. And so like whenever there were those moments every few years or so throughout my childhood, where like it was too much, I would just like kind of explode. And so like I would be like very angry and things like that. And you can obviously tell that it was like so different, like polar opposite from like how normally reserved and quiet you are versus like how like angry and explosive you are. And I think a lot of 9s go through that, especially because we repress things a lot.
Yeah.
But I think it became more and more common as I graduated high school into college. When I was becoming like more of an adult, I remember specifically telling myself throughout college, like, you need to be mean. Like, you need to be meaner and like less nice. And like obviously that doesn't sound good, but it was like in the context of like standing up for yourself in terms of like your time or like your priorities, and not just being walked all over all the time.
Yeah.
Because one thing we tend to do as 9s is like deprioritize our own wants and needs and just go along with what other people want and need. Yeah. And so if you keep doing that over and over, it's not healthy. And so I like consciously told myself, like, be meaner, be more selfish, like just be more selfish. And like I gradually worked into it. So
that's some good reflecting you just did. Yeah. I see.
How do you know? Because a 9 wing 8 is hard, right? So how do you know which one's like your actual number versus like your wing?
Okay, so
he just put on his like professor hat right here.
So I do hear from like other actual Enneagram masters, which I am not an actual master.
Fellow masters.
It's just an exaggeration. But so wings aren't like as important as your core number. So your core number is the most important thing. And then subtypes is kind of just getting more in depth with your core number in different ways. But wings is kind of separate because wings are more like your tools that you use to get through life or like solve problems or cope with things. And so the way wings show up is actually through your behaviors. And a big core idea of the Enneagram is that your core number is not about your behaviors, but about your motivations.
Right.
And so you can tell if your motivations line up with the core number, then that's your number. But the way other people might see you, or like things you do that's visible, or like how you do things in a certain way or not, those will be manifested like either through your core type also, or by leaning on your wings, right? So like a lot of my 8 tendencies, I was never internally an 8. It was just like I acted like an 8 when I needed to like maintain my own sanity or something like that. But always on the inside, I was still like in turmoil, because it's like if I'm like arguing with someone or like something like that, like my 9ness is still like, why, like I don't like this, I'm stressed, right? Even though on the outside I might seem calm and like totally like collected and things like that, that's just the behavior, right? And so, and one other thing is like typically as we go through life, you can very easily like switch wings, and typically we start out leaning towards one wing and then we like gradually shift to the other wing at some point in our lives.
Oh,
So
that we lean towards.
There's a world out there where I might become
I know.
a
I'm
challenger,
like,
where I might become mean.
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I feel like my wing has shifted already.
Yeah.
If I were to reflect on it, I would say I feel like that. Wow. Thank you for enlightening me right now in my mind.
Yeah. If I was guessing or totally guessing, I would say like at least half or more majority of people already shifted their wing when they went like from childhood to like past college and adulthood.
Did you have
at
an
some
8
point.
phase?
Did I have an 8 phase?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Oh, he's in it right now.
It's happening right now. I'm evolving, guys.
Wow,
I'm evolving.
before our eyes. That's amazing. I'm going to kind of shift us to focus on each other a little, as in you two. Only because it sounds like you guys were able to navigate Enneagram together as a couple too. Right. And so I am curious about that. But before we kind of go into that, before you knew a world of Enneagram, I'd be curious to know what attracted you guys to each other. Bound. We don't have that sound effect,
not
but
yet.
bound chicka wow. Okay.
Sarah can go first.
I can. So actually, Andrew and I go pretty like way back. Like we took a Bible study together in 2014.
Okay.
And when I first met him, he sat behind me. It was Living Life, and I thought he was really annoying and aggressive. And he actually asked me to go grab lunch, and we did. And then nothing happened after that because I ghosted him.
Wow, all these things.
Yeah. And so when I saw him, I was like, I'm not going to date this dude. Nuh-uh. He's so aggressive. He's annoying. But then I think it was like a couple years after that, he started shepherding. And I was like, whoa, why was he chosen as a shepherd? This guy was like the last person to be a shepherd. And then through just friends, we started hanging out more. I saw that he was a lot more selfless than he seemed to be on the outside. Because I think when I met him, I saw a lot of his 8 behaviors.
Sounds like, you're right. And then I was like, oh, okay. Like, it's all coming together.
Yeah, but I was like, wow, this guy's actually a softie. And through that, we just got to know each other a lot more. And I saw how, like, even he treated his mom, how he, like, prioritized his house church. And I think through that, I was able to see, like, the person that he really was through the communities that we were a part of.
Wow. So it sounds like you fell in love with the 9, the true him. Huh?
Yeah, it was weird because for a while I didn't know who he was. I was like, this guy like keeps going back and forth, and it was funny because of the whole contradicting aspect that we had talked about. But I think as we got to know each other more, I guess both of us didn't really realize like why we were the way that we were, like why our behaviors would be like manifested in certain ways until both of us read about the Enneagram. I don't know if I may be speaking for you, but like even myself as like a 3-wing 4, a lot of my 4 behaviors, or like when I'm unhealthy, is that the right term? Going to like a 9, I would ask myself like, that's also very contradicting too. And so as we navigated through the Enneagram together, or as he would put those things in my ear, it made both of us realize much more about each other and like why we were the way that we were.
Wow, that's helpful to know. What about you, Andrew? What attracted Sarah to you?
I always had like a list in my head of like qualities I was looking for, as most people do. And yeah, pretty much. I think most of it was like check. And like, I guess I'm trying to think in Enneagram terms, but it wasn't, my list was not in Enneagram terms at all. And so it was just like, I wanted, pretty much a big factor for me is I wanted someone that was capable. And I didn't want like a marriage or relationship that was like kind of, I always had to do things for her. Like I didn't want like a helpless kind of, stereotypical. Like I wanted someone who could like take care of things themselves, who didn't need to be like handheld or babysat or like things in that nature, because I also know myself, and I'm more of like a slow moving type. I think on things a lot, and I like don't get things done as quickly. So I always wanted like a wife or a partner that's like more like aggressively into like getting things done and taking care of things, right? So that's pretty much, I think, the main, aside from like other common things, but that's like one of the main like weird unique things that I look
like
for.
That's very unique.
And
you know what was funny is when he was praying about me, he asked God to specifically make sure he doesn't have to initiate.
So like to go along with that trait,
so Sarah initiated.
So
Yeah,
Sarah
I
actually
initiated
initiated the conversation to like, start dating. So
after the ghosting, wow,
Exactly.
God can make all things
Exactly.
good.
Miracles.
that was just another sign of like, wow,
Yeah.
this girl like knows what she wants and
Yeah.
she can like, get things done. So
Wow, that's. I mean, just now that we are Enneagram talking, it's kind of cool that you guys. It was like the core of those types that actually spoke to you guys in the partnership for each other. Very cool.
I was wondering, did the flip side of that attract you to Andrew? Like someone who's more chill, down to earth, like not as much of a
Asking for a friend.
So I think when I had a crush on him, I didn't see that side as much. I guess like even though I was
It's the
like
pursuing.
yeah, so like even though I was like seeing more of his 9 side of like his selflessness, he was still very much like an 8. So like even like the singles retreat, the very first one that we had at church, like I heard he signed up every single one of his house church members, even against their will. And I was like, oh, I like that. Like that's the kind of leader I feel like I need in my life. But then he ended up not going. So that's a different story.
yeah.
So then I guess that helps when it says like you're coming together now in marriage, right? And whether we have Enneagrams as a topic or not, but just in general, you see more of each other in our human forms, in our comfort forms, right? And so what did that look like when now maybe there were some, these are the tendencies I didn't know before, and how did the Enneagram help you understand one another? Whereas maybe that wasn't the case early years, or maybe it was. How would you guys say you navigated through that understanding of one another, especially because you guys both have contradicting kind of types, which is I want to listen now.
Yeah. So that's actually a big reason we got into the Enneagram more, is because like it was very helpful early on in our marriage. And like,
what year was the Enneagram introduced into your marriage?
well, we were introduced to it like before we got married.
Yeah, so we
the
were
mentor
taking it was during premarital.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, so it was like, okay, that's awesome.
Yeah. But then like we didn't like get super
Right,
into it
right.
until actually it was pretty much our first year of marriage. And like that's when you're figuring out different like lifestyles and different like tons of getting used to adjustments, right? And when we moved in together and like we were seeing each other all the time,
Laughter.
a lot of like personality differences definitely come through, right? And so I don't know how long after we got married, but like within the first year for sure, we started looking into the Enneagram because we were so different and we would fight about like a lot of like non-important things, so like one revelation that I'm sure like Sarah's also thinking about, because it's like the main revelation, is our conflict resolution styles. And that's common to like the numbers. And so 9s are in the withdrawing stance, and 3s are in the assertive stance or aggressive stance, which pretty much means like when there is a conflict, 9s tend to withdraw first and like think it over and like mull it over and then come back and solve it, right? And then 3s are kind of the opposite. Like when there's a conflict, they're like, we need to take care of this now before like doing anything else. Like we need to take care of it. And so whenever there is even like tiny conflicts, I would like kind of retreat and be like, I need to process it. But Sarah would be like, we're not doing anything else until we figure this out now. And like our styles were just so different, like polar opposites. So like I couldn't even hide because we lived in like a 1-bedroom apartment. And so like
Not this beautiful home we're in now.
of course, right? Exactly. And so it was like, and especially for a 9, I think one of the underlying reasons why we like withdraw is that we have better solutions and answers after we think it over. But if Sarah was like, we need to figure this out now, then like the way I would react to it is not as like good or healthy or positive. And I just like yell back at her or something, or like, just not a good solution.
Right.
And then for Sarah, it was hard on her end to like have a conflict, but then like all this time is passing and she's wondering like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't we dealing with this? and I'm like just kind of just like thinking it over, or like I'm like doing the dishes while I'm like mad at her in my head or whatever, and she's like, what's going on, like when are we going to talk about this? And so we both had to kind of meet in the middle. I know Sarah like definitely learned a lot to like give me space first, and then we can talk about it at a future time. A common technique I know married people use is like setting a time, like talking about it, that you will talk about it, right? So like, oh, like let's discuss this like in a few hours or something, right? Just so there's clarity. But I think that's one of like the main Enneagram help that we had early on in our marriage.
Yeah. And I think also for me, like one thing that really bugs me a lot is laziness. And when I see the house in disarray, but Andrew's like sitting on the couch and just laying there, I would go up to him and be like, why are you being lazy? Like, can you clean the house or bring it up at that point? But I think now, because we've learned so much about each other, like when I see him doing that, for me now, I'm like, okay, he's resting. I need to give him that space. And if I ask him to clean while he's resting, then he's probably gonna rest or be lazy even more. And so I think I see a lot of his behaviors, and I can tell kind of where he is mentally and how he's doing. And I'll try to navigate my conversations that way. When I'm also in a good place, I can do that.
So when do you now think so you have like a set time where you talk to him about those things, or like what does that look like if it's not in the moment? Asking for a friend.
I think one thing that actually helped us a lot was we would have like weekly date nights. We haven't done it in like a while. We would call them family nights, and we would have a sit down conversation going through the same questions, like what brought you joy this week? What made you sad this week? What could I be doing better for you? And just creating that safe space has been really helpful. So even though we may not be doing that on a regular basis now, I can see like if he's resting and doing something that he's like trying to productively rejuvenate in his own way, because my resting and his resting look very different. I'll see that and try not to bother him in that time, because I know if I interject or interfere with that, then it's not going to go anywhere. Yeah. And I had to learn that the hard way during our, I would say, first 2 years of marriage.
Do you know my type, Andrew? Because I want to start talking about it, but
I don't. I would like to know though. I was thinking the same thing.
Well, as our faithful followers know, my husband is a 9-wing 8, which is why I wanted to get to know Andrew, because I want to get to know my husband's mind a little. Even though everyone has their own, like types and journeys and whatnot, it was just like helpful to learn more about like the inner thoughts, or especially because you're an Enneagram master, right? So like it would be really helpful to understand a little more. But right before this, we took the Enneagram test in our house church, and he freaking got a 3. He got more 9 by like a few percentage. But the test that we took, which I do like this one, it's your Enneagram coach, but I liked how it narrowed the choices. But it said because of his choices towards the end, he's actually a 3. Now it's like so confusing, because he's like, oh well, yeah, like this could be like me too, which I know 9s when they're healthy could be a 3. And so I was like, well, when you are healthy, I see you as a 3, but I really see you as a 9. But now he's like convinced he's maybe a 3. And so now I feel like, now he can listen to this and hear Sarah and then hear you and then decide
which one he is. Oh, yeah.
Okay, Matt, you got a lot of reflection to do. But yeah, so that's him. And I am a 2 wing 3, but I have a very strong wing 3, but like my 2 is like, it's like 100, not like 100%, but it's pretty.
2 and 3 were my first 2 guesses, actually.
Oh, wow. Why?
We'll never know if that's what you really. Why? Yeah, why?
I'm curious.
When you were talking about your son.
Oh. Oh, okay.
It was very brief, but it was just a guess.
Yeah. So then I was excited, because I know like just to learn more from like a 3 part of Sarah's, just because that is a heavy part, even though I know my core is 100% like a 2. So it helps me resonate with like things when we first got together, and like we would have a fight of some sort, and then I would go like do the laundry and he would be sleeping, and I'd be like, how dare you sleep in front of me? I was like, oh my gosh, like I just like poured out my feelings and you're sleeping in front, I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? But also like I don't think he knew why he was sleeping sometime. And so like it's hard because I want to understand him. And I think that's like the two part of me. Like, I really want to just like get him more so that then I can approach him better. But I couldn't get him more because there's not the reflection. I love him. We're doing great. But like, you know what I'm saying? So I was very curious like how that works. And like, obviously not wanting to also like in the moment, I'll be like, okay, well, why is this happening? Or like, and like obviously learning about a 9 is that doesn't help them when they are in that state. And I think he's still a 9, but I'll let him decide that on his own for sure. But yeah, so I thought that was interesting to kind of like hear.
I'm like 98% sure he's a 9.
Right? And he has and I'm pretty sure his 8, like when he took a different test, it was like his 9 and 8 and then 7 were really high. So I think he's a really strong 9 wing 8 that like resonates with all the other ones, right? Like
so
when you guys were
like,
talking about that, like resonating with all of them, I was like, that's why he chose 3, which I see, and I would love it if he is a healthy 3 as a 9, but I think he's a 9, and yeah. But then it was interesting when I was listening is like when you're unhealthy, it goes to a 9. So then that must be also difficult in the beginning stages of when you guys were learning that like conflict resolution, just because for you that reflected traits that were not healthy versus for Andrew that would be a healthy state of a 9 when he was in certain places of rest or whatnot. So I thought that was like very interesting, which I mean, I'm sure couples can figure that out on their own in other ways, but like the Enneagram helps you understand that part.
So just to clarify one thing. So like, I don't know if we said this or all your listeners already know, but there's like stress numbers and security numbers. And one is like a number that you move to when you're stressed. And another is a number you move to when you're secure or like insecurity. And this kind of like your wings, it's also like mostly behavioral, right? So like how you behave and things you do. And for 9, myself, when I'm in stress, I move to 3. Or 6. Sorry, when I'm in security, I move to 3. So like when I'm in a good place or things like that or growing, I'll behave more and more like a 3, which annoys Sarah a lot.
I don't like
she sees like, oh, is this how I am to Andrew all the time?
I see so much of myself and I'm like, ew, what is that?
Yeah. And then when Sarah is in stress, she moves to 9 as a 3. So we just happen to like share that line, like where we become each other throughout different stages and things like that. And like obviously when she's stressed as a 9 and I see her as like, oh, she's being like lazy and unproductive and like I can tell kind of thing. But yeah, so that's just to clarify that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. We like try to barely touch on it. So I think now that we have more examples of different people, and then it can become more of a understanding since the Enneagram is so complex. So thank you for that. What about the other parts? So when you're unhealthy, like what have you seen about yourself when you move into that line versus you, Sarah?
I guess like when I'm unhealthy, well, okay, so there's like kind of 2 scales. There's like healthy and unhealthy within the number. So like a healthy 9 and an unhealthy 9. But then there's also like in stress and security is when you like kind of make the move to a different type of behavior. So like when I'm in stress is when I'll move to 6. It's like the 3-6-9 triangle, where like if you're on the 3-6-9 triangle, you frequently become like the other 2 numbers in the 3-6-9 triangle.
So she would move to a 6 for her healthy.
Exactly.
Oh, you would share. Oh,
exactly.
Oh, I
so
see.
3, 6, and 9 are kind of like on their own little separate world in the Enneagram. And since we're like a married couple and we're both on the 3-6-9 triangle, it's very very fun.
What are the odds?
It's fun because the other married couple in our house church too, they're also on the 3-6-9 scale.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because Edward's a 6 and
Iris is a 9.
Oh wow! So do you guys like empathize with each other a lot?
Or? Oh yeah, all the time. Edward and I can relate on so many things.
Oh, especially because you also thought you were potentially a 6 at one, or just in general.
Because
you guys are married to the 9.
because we're married to 9s.
You're late. Is that what
relate.
you,
Relate,
I think
relate.
you're late because you're married to
Oh no.
no.
Maybe sometimes, but not all the time.
When you guys are in like your moments of stress,
Mm-hmm.
what are the things that cue you to be like, oh, I'm stressed out right now? And then what are the ways that you cope with that? Like, how do you get yourself out of that?
I think in general, at least this is how I see it. In general, there isn't really like a cue that's like says like I'm in a stressed mode. Typically, especially when you're in stress, you're not as aware of like the differences in your behavior. Other people might see it, but obviously like other people don't want to be like, hey, like you're stressed because you're like this, right? And like telling you how you
Showing
are
me
kind of
3
thing.
signs, yours.
Well, Sarah loves to say stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, I call it out all the time. I'm like, what's wrong with you?
And like I guess inherently in the stress, like when you move to a number in stress, naturally you move to like the negative or like the less healthy side of that number. And so you're not really like, oh, like I'm growing and becoming a better person, all these things. You're kind of just trying to deal with whatever you're stressed about, right? And so you're already preoccupied. And so it's more rare to realize it in that moment. But actually the goal is like when you're in your stress number to realize it, and that's how you like get back to not being in your stress number. Because I think the general wisdom is that like we all need our stress numbers behaviors in order to make it through life. It's like it's things that we normally don't do or behave in those ways that like when we are stressed, like we need to rely on those personality traits in order to like get what we need, right? So
I think the way one of the Enneagram master people described it was you fall into the place that your body's like crying for help. So it's like a physical indicator that shows your loved ones that you're in need of help. So for me, when I become a 9, it's actually very apparent. Like it's very obvious because after like coming home from work, I'll like go to bed or just like lay in bed doing nothing for hours. And that's very unlike me because usually like I hated naps and like I thought naps were like the biggest waste of time. But like the past 2 years, I've been napping so much, like during COVID and then during like the whole time my dad was sick. Like that was just where I would go to every day was like I would just be in bed. And that's when Andrew would be like, chop, chop, you've been lazy, time to get out of bed and like, let's go do something and things like that, which has been really helpful. But I don't think if it weren't for the Enneagram, I wouldn't know why I was falling into that place. So most of my life, like when I'm in those, sorry, I keep saying unhealthy, but it's stressed, right? Stressed. When I'm stressed, I would become so lazy to like a very negative side of 9. And I would go into like a true identity crisis. I'm like, who am I? I'm like this go-getter, initiative, busy type of person, but like, why am I laying here and can't do anything? I'm like crippled by it. And so I think Enneagram helped me a lot in that way. And for Andrew, because he is so good at like challenging me and helping me like kind of get out of those states, he has no issues telling me like, hey, you've been in a bad place lately, like realize it. And so I'm like, oh, okay.
That's really good when the buy-in, I don't know, of the Enneagram is together in a marriage. Because then like you can help, like really understand those things and then be called to be the challenger to each other in those times when it's necessary. So yay, I'm glad you do that and vice versa. It sounds like y'all are both good at that.
yeah.
I think I try. So like I can tell when Andrew's stressed, it's mostly because he has like 80 things on his to-do list and he can't get any of them done because he's so crippled by the fact that he has so much to do. For me, it's like, just do them. Like this one will take 2 minutes, just do it and start checking things off. But for him, when I see him stressed, it's like, okay, how can I help you get some things done? Because that's generally, I feel like it's like the common denominator every time you're in this like very stressed, like negative place, it's because you have a million things to do.
Typically.
Yeah. So I'm like, hey, let's get you a planner and like write out the things you have to do. And he's like, no.
Do you like have a plan, or do you like write notes, or like have a planner and stuff?
Yeah, I am
Oh,
a heavy task manager, I
Okay.
guess. So I have like reminders lists and like
Okay.
to-do
I was
lists,
curious on what
multiple
things are.
different apps at the same time, all with thousands of badges. Okay, not thousands, but it feels like thousands of badges, just nagging at me, telling me to do things.
Got
So
it.
Man, that
Interesting.
sounds so stressful to me.
it is stressful.
I would see that list and be like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah, because like Matt never took notes in med school, and he
Wow.
passed. Really. So
In med school?
Yeah, I'm not even
Wow.
lying. And so, like, I just was baffled by his studying method. I'm just curious, like, where that part comes from, because like I'm the opposite. It's like I'm too many notes, right? And so it's like probably ineffective sometimes. But I was just curious, and like with like reminders or things, I like have all these things that I like write down to remember. But like he just remembers, and what he doesn't remember. Well, so I was just curious if that's I'm just trying to learn.
Yeah.
Some things are personalities too.
Just one clarification earlier. So like when we say the word stress, like when you move to a different number in stress, it's not like the typical like headache, I'm stressed kind of definition of the word stress. It's like, it's really hard to describe it like in one sentence, but it's kind of like your life is in stress or like your personality is in stress. It's not you are stressed. Like
Yes.
that's very different, because you can be stressed in your number, which is more common. Just because you're stressed doesn't make you like move to your stress
Right.
number.
And you can be stressed, or you can be whatever you just said, with certain relationships too. It doesn't have to be like with everyone. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I feel like I see my stress line 8 a lot in particular relationships, but not always. But I think I don't know, that's something I had realized lately. So, and then it helps me pinpoint which of, especially being like a 2 and relationship oriented, like then I try to think about like, oh, why is this way or whatnot.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying what I just jumbled back. Man, I really do love the Enneagram because it reveals your inner desires, even if your type might seem so surprising to others on the outside. We hope you enjoyed listening to Sarah and Andrew share their reflection and journey towards using the Enneagram in self-discovery and also together in marriage. I know I was already getting served with so much wisdom in how to continue using this in my own life. Our conversation with them was so fun that it lasted for nearly 2 hours. So stay tuned for part 2 with fresh ears, where we hear more about how they were able to use the Enneagram relationally with others as a couple together. Trust me, the discussion gets even better, so see you soon.